In this episode of Traverse Talks, Jim Horn previews the upcoming Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners meeting, highlighting key agenda items that have significant policy and financial implications. The discussion covers unfinished business related to water management, the reestablishment of influential committees, and updates on broadband access and ARPA funding. Jim emphasizes the importance of governance and the subtle signals that may indicate future policy directions. So let's take a listen.
Good morning and welcome to Traverse Talks. I'm Jim Horn, and this is your preview of this week's meeting of the Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners, which takes place this Wednesday, January 7th, 2026. This is a regular board meeting, but it's one of those agendas that looks routine at first glance, and then once you dig in, reveals several items with real policy and financial implications, from infrastructure and federal funding to how the county organizes its most influential committees for the year ahead. So here's the big picture overview. At a high level, this meeting is about governance and follow-through. Commissioners will be tying off loose ends from 2025, continuing long-running discussions around water management in the chain of lakes, deciding how millions in federal ARPA dollars are reimbursed and tracked, and formally reestablishing the ad hoc committees that shape development, incentives, and employee compensation in 2026. That's not a lot of flashy new business, but there are several decisions that quietly set the direction for the coming year. Let's start with the item most likely to generate discussion: unfinished business, the chain of lakes updated resolution, and discussion with the county drain commissioner. This has been on the board's radar for some time, and it deals with how Grand Traverse County approaches water management, lake levels, and drainage in one of the county's most sensitive and visible watersheds. The updated resolution and the discussion itself suggest commissioners are still working through jurisdictional roles, long-term responsibilities, and how aggressive or cautious the county should be moving forward. What to watch for here is whether the commissioners signal a clearer policy direction or whether this remains an issue that gets kicked down the road for further study and negotiation. Next up, also under unfinished business, is reestablishing ad hoc committees for 2026. This may sound procedural, but it's anything but. The board is being asked to reestablish the TIF, Pilot, and Brownfield Ad Hoc Committee, along with the Salary and Retention Committee. These groups wield outsized influence. The Development-Related Committee shapes how tax incentives are offered to private projects, while the Salary and Retention Committee plays a major role in employee compensation, recruitment, and long-term workforce stability. Pay attention to how commissioners talk about the scope and priority of these committees. That often telegraphs where policy debates are headed for later in the year. Now, here are the consent calendar highlights. Most of this meeting's action technically sits on the consent calendar, and while much of it is routine, there are a few items worth flagging. First, broadband equity, access, and development, or BEAD project updates. These are part of the broader effort to expand reliable broadband access, especially in underserved areas. Even when presented as a receive and file, these updates matter because they track progress on infrastructure that affects economic development, education, and public services. Secondly, there's an ARPA status report and ARPA reimbursement request. Commissioners will be approving reimbursement requests tied to previously approved funding agreements reviewed by the finance director and reported under federal Treasury rules. While the dollar amounts are in the packet, the bigger issue is oversight, how effectively these one-time federal dollars are being tracked, spent, and documented as deadlines approach. On the approval side, note the purchase of service agreement between the Commission on Aging and the Area Agency on Aging of Northwest Michigan, running through 2028. This supports services for older adults who qualify under the Michigan Choice Waiver Program, and it reflects longer-term commitments in the county's aging services network. And worth mentioning, a $7,145 change order for the governmental center chiller replacement project. It's not a massive sum, but its infrastructure change orders are always a reminder how even planned projects can evolve and add cost once work begins. Finally, commissioners will affirm the appointment of Traverse City Manager Benjamin Marentet to the Board of Public Works, a governance move that strengthens coordination between the city and county on shared infrastructure responsibilities. So if you're going to watch this meeting on Wednesday morning or you want to tune in later on, this is really what you ought to keep your eye on. First, whether the Chain of Lakes discussion brings sharper questions or differing philosophies among commissioners about environmental stewardship versus regulatory restraint. Second, whether an ARPA-related items are pulled from consent for discussion, especially as the window for using these funds begins to narrow. And third, listen closely to how commissioners frame the Salary and Retention Committee. Any commitments about competitiveness, staffing challenges, or budget pressures are likely previews of larger workforce debates later on this year. That meeting, the Board of Commissioners meeting, is going to take place on Wednesday at the Governmental Center in Traverse City, and it's open to the public, both in person and online. As always, if you watch or attend, listen for the signals beneath the surface, because this agenda is more about direction than drama. And be sure to check back here for Traverse Talks later this week, when we'll break down exactly what happened and what it means going forward. Hey, I'm Jim Horn. This is Traverse Talks. Have yourself one great week.